Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another episode review, and this time I'm bringing you an episode from Season 3, and we're going to be discussing an old story. Now I know the DVD says My Best Friend is Invisible, but if you turn it over on the back, you see an old story. So this is what I'm going to be using to refer for the episode review. Now off the bat, this episode was directed by Randy Bradshaw, which I think he did a couple of episodes in the show. I think this is definitely the most memorable one off the top of my head that he did. I think he did a couple of other ones that were pretty good. But this one, I definitely have seen the most from him, considering that this was on a VHS release back in the 90s with Bride of the Living Dummy. And I owned that VHS as a kid, and I watched it quite often. And I have to say, this episode surprisingly still holds up till this day as being one of the more memorable episodes. Now, this episode arguably is the most divisive episodes in the show, if not the most. It's like definitely one of the most. I know Attack of the Mutant seems to be pretty divisive out there as well. Like, is it a bad episode? Is it a good episode? This is another one, an old story. Is it a bad episode or is it a good episode? It's a very love-hate thing. If you watch this, it's going to make you feel a type of way because the context of the story essentially deals with child trafficking. And it's one of the more thought-provoking episodes, and it's genuinely disturbing because it tends to play on fears that we all have as kids. Fears of getting old is one of the main fears in this story, and another fear would be getting abducted or, being sent away against your will. As a child, you get to lose your childhood. I mean, being old and being child trafficked is kind of explored in the same thought, as in you're losing your childhood at this. You both of the ideas essentially take away your childhood, right? So the episode and in the story itself, the short story, comes to commentate on that and makes a story centered around both ideas. And some people might view it as bad taste, outdated. Why did this ever get made? But honestly, I think this is a genuinely disturbing episode. It's definitely one of the more memorable episodes. And I know I might get slammed for this, but I rather enjoyed this episode. It's more of like a guilty pleasure type of thing. And maybe nostalgia plays a factor into this, but I'm really invested into this episode. I know for a couple people, this is one of their favorite episodes out there. I know In the Closet Goosebumps fan, if you're watching, this is one of your favorite episodes. And I know Michael, Goosebumps fan, really loves this episode as well. And I think if you grew up watching it on the VHS, if you grew up acclimated to the episode, you might be more influenced to like it. But I can totally understand if you do not like this episode. Don't take me as saying that I like the episode as I had bad taste or anything. Just, I have a fondness for the episode, but not because of the subject matter, just for the emotions it makes me feel, and I tend to view it in a different way than some other people view it. So yeah, and I think Charles Laser, who did the script, this is an episode that features a couple of differences from the source material. I think Charles Laser definitely put his own mark on the story with the changes that were made. And I think slightly improved some things here and there, but I do have some detractions that I'll get into at the end of the video. So let's get it. But overall, I would recommend trying this one if you have not watched it before. It's going to make you feel a certain type of way, but know that before you go into it, okay? So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So these two brothers, Tom and John, are home alone. Their parents have gone away on a trip, and they're looking around for food down in the basement, and they can't find anything to eat. And they're upset that the parents didn't go grocery shopping before they left. And while they're down in the basement, they're creeped out because it's dark. And then they're surprised by somebody at the top of the stairs. And it's revealed to be their Aunt Dahlia. Now, Aunt Dahlia, in the episode version here, is the actual aunt to the boys. As in the short story, there's a difference there that plays into the short stories version. But in this version, Aunt Dahlia is actually their aunt. And Tom and John don't remember meeting her, but Dahlia says, I seen you guys when you were younger. Your parents asked me to come watch you. And Tom and John immediately ask her, hey, do you have anything to eat? And she said, well, let me make you some of my famous cookies. So Tom and John start playing some video games, like a virtual reality game, and they're waiting to get fed some food because they're hungry. And Aunt Dahlia brings out some cookies, and at first they look excited, but they look down at the cookies, and they notice that they're weird-looking cookies with this gel in it that seems to move around. And they ask, what are these cookies? And Aunt Dahlia says, they're prune cookies. They're good for you. And the boys try eating them, and then Aunt Dahlia keeps telling them to eat them. And the boys, of course, oblige and eat. And then Aunt Dahlia takes them up to their room and tells them to go to bed. And the next morning comes around, and the boys get up, and they feel lethargic. Their voice has gotten a little bit deeper. They don't feel like themselves. And when they get up, they look at each other, and they notice that they're graying in their hair. They're starting to get wrinkles. They're like, what's going on? And they go down to Aunt Dahlia, and Aunt Dahlia says, what's the matter? You guys look good. You guys look great. And the boys are confused, like, no, we don't. We're aging. What's wrong? And Aunt Dahlia is like, you need to eat more prunes. And she notifies them that she's going to make some more prune stuff for them, and that she has friends coming over. Her friends Miriam and Lillian are going to be coming over later, and that the boys need to get freshened up before they get here. So, of course, Miriam and Lillian end up showing up later, and Tom and John are, weirded out and worried what's going on. And these girls come in, older women, and they sit down with Tom and John. And one of them seems to be really, enamored with Tom, and one of them seems to be really enamored with John. And this is a kind of a creepy part of the episode, I'm not going to lie, because, dealing with, like, adults and minors here, but yeah, it's there. The context is there. And Tom is like, hey, I need to go run to the store real quick. And Aunt Dahlia's looking at Tom like, what do you got up your sleeve? But Tom's like, no, you can trust me. I can go pick up something from the store. I think it was milk or something. So Aunt Dahlia lets Tom go to the store. And when Tom goes to the store, he's being greeted like he's an older person. He's like, well, what's going on? And he goes to where the milk would be, and he looks into the mirror, and he sees that he's aged even further. He's now bald. His age has really starting to show, like he's like pushing like 70 or 80. And the practical effects on the makeup here is really well done, I have to say. And Tom is like, oh no, what's going on? So Tom ends up leaving the convenience store and coming home to check on John. And John's basically in the same situation that Tom is in. They both have progressed in their aging. And it comes down to sit down and play a game with Aunt Dahlia, Miriam, and Lillian. And the creepiness kind of continues there. But the boys meet up, and they realize that they have to find a way out of here because something's not right. John wants to sneak off and go spy in Aunt Dahlia's room and see what he can find. And while he's in there, he hides under the bed when he hears Aunt Dahlia coming upstairs. And she basically reveals without him knowing, without her knowing that he's in there, that she's going to take payment from the women because she's going to sell these boys to these women to marry them. And this is where a lot of the tension comes in the community, where people are like, yeah, this is really bad taste. But it gets a little better. So when John reveals this information to Tom, when they go up to the room and they're discussing it, they're like, we got to get out of here. They got something weird planned. She has something weird planned with us. We got to figure out a way to solve this. And when they go back downstairs after Aunt Dahlia confronts them and breaks into the room, and they go into the kitchen, and they were like, we can't eat prunes. We got to eat something. And they find some baby food stashed in the cabinet from their baby sibling that happens to be away with their parents. The parents left some baby food. So they start eating some baby food, And John looks over at Tom, and Tom's regressing in his age, so now he's getting younger. They're like, baby food, it must be the antidote, because enchanted prunes, right? And they start eating the baby food, and then they transform back to their normal age, and then Aunt Dahlia, Miriam, and Lillian break into the kitchen, and Aunt Dahlia tells the girls to grab the prunes because they need to age them again. And Tom and John, of course, put up a fight with Aunt Dahlia, and they take the prune juice that's in the fridge that makes them age, and Aunt Dahlia's like, don't do it. And Tom throws it all over Aunt Dahlia, and it's pretty graphic for the show, but she's essentially vaporized into bones, and she crumbles and dies. And the other two women skedaddle off, and Tom and John are like, that was a close one, we gotta call Mom. And then it goes into the ending, right? So Tom grabs the phone, and he's about to call his mom, and he's looking for John because they want to talk to John. And he goes into the living room, and let's just say there's a twist ending that involves John, and it's kind of ambiguous. And does John have something to help him get out of the situation he's currently in, maybe dealing with baby food and the prune cookies, the dynamic there? And that's how the story ends for the episode, An Old Story. So yeah, this one is a very thought-provoking episode, like I said in the beginning. The positives stem down to the subject itself of the episode, more so than the spectacularness of the episode, I would say. It converges two ideas. There's two fears coinciding here. The fear of getting old as a kid. We've seen this used in another episode, The Haunted Mask 2. Afraid of getting old too quick. That's there in this. And it's also blended with another fear of losing childhood, and that is innocence of childhood, child trafficking, right? And it's kind of blending the ideas, and they both are intermingling in this concept that they're both at the same time being trafficked and turned old, so they experience double the fear with these concepts blending together. And it's a very interesting type of story from how the characters play out in the story. Tom and John are just unsuspecting kids, with Aunt Dahlia being probably one of my favorite antagonists of the entire Goosebumps franchise because of this. Aunt Dahlia plays on a lot of realistic fears. She has some type of magical powers. She's running a business, trafficking her own nephews. I mean, like, there's something real about her that just makes her stand out and feel unique. And the whole story really feels tense because as the viewer, especially as an older viewer, I understand the situation that they're in, and Aunt Dahlia becomes more unsettling and disturbing. And I think it's effective. I don't think it's like off-putting or anything. I can see how it could be off-putting for others. But in my perspective, I think it works. I think it works as a villain, especially as a Goosebumps episode. If you're able to remove the context out of the equation and kind of replace it with, I know what's going on here, but I can see how it's an effective kids' horror story. She's really well done. The pacing of the episode feels like a short story adaptation. Is to the point. Very, I want to say the most faithful short story adaptation there is. It does change a few things, which are other positives I have. So in the episode here, it differs from the short story, as in the antidote for the prune cookies in the episode is baby food. In the short story, it's anti-wrinkle cream. So I think there's subtle changes here that work for the episode. And the ending, the ambiguous ending, I like how it didn't give a twist more so than an ambiguous ending here. And I feel like there's a uncertainty to where if the boys had to go through a pretty traumatic event, and what Tom discovers with John at the end leaves it open-ended, and it leaves kind of a bittersweet taste in my mouth. Like wow, okay, so hopefully he can help John, but at the same time, wow, that was really good. That's a really effective ending. and it's pretty memorable. Like the performances, Aunt Dahlia's performance is great. The boys actually were really well acted for the show. The boy who plays Tom, I remember seeing him in like Lizzie McGuire. So yeah, it has some pretty decent child acting talent in this episode. Like I said, Aunt Dahlia was great too. Very well acted. It gets pretty dark for an episode, not only in the premise, but Aunt Dahlia literally gets vaporized in the episode. So yeah, there's some legitimate tension here. It's disturbing. It's slightly emotional. It's thought provoking. There's a lot mixing around. There's some ideas, some significant ideas, and significant child fears that are very relevant going on. But I do have some negatives. And my only negative with this is essentially the change of Aunt Dahlia being the actual aunt, right? What makes the short story so good from the Tales to Give You Goosebumps book number 4 story that this episode's adapting is that Aunt Dahlia isn't really an aunt to these boys. Actually, they don't really know who this person, the parents don't really know who this person is in the short story. And it leaves a very, even more disturbing note. The episode, the change there, I can understand why, to not convolute it and maybe hire more actors to be the parents or something. But wow, like, it didn't hit the same with her character, especially near the end. Because after Aunt Dahlia gets taken care of in the short story, you have that other additional twist with her character that really sells the experience a little more. I feel like the experience here was weirdly cheapened from that decision. And I kind of view it as a medium hitting deficit because from somebody who's read the short story, I rather prefer that additional twist with her character, and it being missing here just really separates it from being really close to the short story for me. So when it comes to a 0 to 5 stars, since this is my only negative, but it is a slightly heavy-hitting one, I deducted 0.4 off for that issue I have with Aunt Dahlia, and I gave it a 4.6 out of 5, which is an A. I actually think this episode's one of the better episodes in the show. I think this is a pretty excellent episode. I know it's divisive. I can totally understand if you don't like this, or if it's one of your least favorite episodes. I totally get it. Not mad at you. But I kind of appreciate this. And it's probably in my top 15. I don't know exactly where yet, but it's up there. Not in my top 10, but definitely top 15. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the episode adaptation of an old story. Let me know down in the comment section if you have watched this episode before. Did you love this episode or did you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.